From the great state of Pennsylvania, Mr. Doyle.
I thank my colleague from California and my colleagues from New York and Connecticut. Many of us that you'll see on the floor tonight, we're not regulars. We're not people that come to the floor often to speak. But I think many of us feel it's important for the American people to understand the nature of this task, this battle that we face on their behalf. You know, we hear a lot from Republicans about the president not wanting to negotiate, not wanting to talk, that Democrats don't want to negotiate. And they've been pretty good at saying that over and over and over again, Mr. Speaker. But what they're not telling the American people is the nature of the negotiation that they want to have. And I think it's important that that be revealed. You know, what makes me so angry, and the reason I'm here tonight, is what we face in the country right now is completely a manufactured crisis. There is no structural economic reason that our country should be facing default come the 17th of this month. There's no reason that 800 federal employees aren't working. There's no structural, no reason for this to happen. This is being manufactured by a party because they're trying to get something that they've not been able to get at the ballot box. We have divided government. The Republicans control the House of Representatives. The Senate is controlled by the Democratic Party. We have a Democratic president. The Republicans had two goals going into this manufactured crisis. One was to destroy the health care bill. Now, this is a bill that passed the House of Representatives. It passed the Senate. It was signed by the President. It was upheld by the Supreme Court. And we had a presidential election. And their candidate said on day one of his new administration, the first thing he would do if elected was to repeal the Affordable Care Act. That gentleman lost by 5 million votes. So, what they can't accomplish at the ballot box, they now were looking for a way to accomplish here. But it couldn't be done through the regular process, Mr. Speaker. It couldn't be done through the regular order. So now comes this ingenious idea, hatched by the Tea Party wing of the Republican Party, to say, here's what we'll do. We'll wait for the end of the fiscal year to come. And we'll say, we're going to shut the government down unless you repeal Obamacare. You know, I was on this floor a couple days ago and read something on the floor that I had saw on the internet by a young man by the name of Judd Legum. I hope I've said his last name correctly. And he put an analogy about what we were actually facing. He said it's sort of like someone comes up to you and says, I want to burn down your house. You look at the guy and you say, no. And you say, well, I just want to burn down the second floor. And you tell him no. And he goes, well, what about your garage? Can I burn your garage down? You say, no. And the guy said, well, let's just sit down and talk about what part of your house I can burn down. And you look at the guy and you say, no. And he goes, you see, you're not compromising. This is what we're facing in this so-called rigged negotiation. What Republicans are saying is, defund Obamacare, we'll open up the government. We said no. Then they said, well, delay Obamacare for a year, and we'll open up the government. And we said no. And then they said, well, just get rid of that individual mandate, which effectively kills the health care bill. And we said no. And then they said, well, will you just sit down and negotiate with us and tell us what part of the Affordable Care Act we can get rid of? And we said there's 20 million Americans that are counting on this bill. It's the law of the land. The answer is no. And they look at us and say the Democrats don't want to negotiate. The president doesn't want to negotiate. Well, I got news for my friends over there. We're not going to negotiate the rights of 20 million uninsured Americans because they can't get this done at the ballot box. So now, Mr. Speaker, what's the new strategy? They've shifted off of the health care bill now because the American public, by margins of over 70%, have said, we don't want you to shut the government down to try to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. So now where they've moved? To the Ryan budget. What's the Ryan budget? It's a budget that keeps us in sequester. It's a budget that does not invest in our infrastructure. It's a budget that does not invest in the education of our children. It's a budget that makes it impossible for this economy to grow. And it's a budget that threatens the social safety net that many of our senior citizens depend on. And they couldn't get it passed in the regular order. They couldn't get it passed in the own House of Representatives for a long time. They were afraid to put the bill on the floor. And they certainly couldn't get it passed in the Senate, and they knew the president wouldn't sign it. So what's the strategy now? This new rigged negotiation that we're being asked to have with our friends is give us pieces of the Ryan budget, and in return, we'll open up the government and we'll raise the debt ceiling. But only if you give us what we want in the Ryan budget. Mr. Speaker, we want to have a budget negotiation with our friends on the Republican side. The House has passed a budget. The Senate has passed a budget. The numbers, there's a great disparity in the numbers. Democrats believe in investing in America. We want to rebuild our roads and bridges and sewer systems. We want to invest in the education of our children. We want to protect our seniors and our veterans. It costs money to do that, Mr. Speaker, so there is a difference. But we're ready and we're willing to appoint conferees tomorrow to sit down and have a negotiation. I want the American public to understand that we have asked 18 times to appoint conferees to negotiate the differences in the Senate budget and the House budget, and all 18 times the Republicans in the House have said no. So, Mr. Speaker, I would just say if there's someone in this House that's not willing to negotiate, it's our friends on the Republican side of the aisle. The American people deserve a budget negotiation where we sit down and settle our differences. We're not going to get everything we want, Mr. Speaker. It's divided government. The Republicans are going to get something in this budget negotiation. The Democrats are going to get something in this budget negotiation. But the country moves forward. We pay our bills, and we live to fight another day. Mr. Speaker, in closing, let me say to the American people, we will not be part of a rigged negotiation where democratic priorities and principles aren't allowed to be discussed. Only that which the Republicans couldn't get in the ballot box that they're trying to get now by holding a gun to our head. That's not the way you do business in the United States of America. That kind of behavior has to be stopped. Mr. Speaker, for the good of the American people, I hope Republicans will come to their senses, pass a clean CR, and let's sit down and negotiate a budget agreement for the American people and move this country forward. I thank you for giving me this time, and I yield back to you.
Mr. Doyle, thank you.